how hard can I push this one aspect of the lift? I went in for my last big deadlift, which was a 275. The weakest part of the body gave. Can I take a record in it? Can I set some new standards for it? Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I pulled my first 262. My mentality was just in the gym I was in. So as much as I was like, it's all right, that big bloke's out pulling me. Lifetime natural, never taken anything that I shouldn't have.
And how do you feel about someone who's hiding steroids and competing against you?
Without being cocky about it, I've not been beaten by them. My eyes sort of sink in and I get a little bit more like, a little bit of venom appears in the lift. It's like, I've got to do this because, you know, I've got to prove it for the sober boys. So the last question I've got in that sport is, how far can I push it?
Hello, I'm here with probably the strongest deadlifter in Sussex, Graham Colledge, and we're going to be talking about everything deadlift today. And what I'm interested in is did you even get started with the deadlift?
With deadlift, I joined the gym nearly 10 years ago. Went over to Zeus's with the initial goal of putting on a little bit of weight and getting a bit more toned up, which I've completely failed in by this point. As I've gained roughly 2.5 kilos. I'm a little bit more toned, but I can't really say that like a decade of work later, 2.5 kilos is enough. While I was there sort of training away, one of the strongmen came over to us to say, oh, it's a strongman gym, you should get into this, you know, come have a go. And I was like, a little bit of a trepidation. Eventually started doing like the squats, the bench, the deadlift, everything else. And then there was like Atlas stones, there was cars to pull, it was all exciting. I was like, okay, got into strength training through that. Did that for 2 or 3 years, a couple of comps behind us. Then went straight into powerlifting from there. About 6 years ago when I had my son, because I found strongman training to be too intensive on the training time-wise. So you had to, you know, try and train for a truck pull. You can't do that solo. Try and get ready for a Conan's wheel. Again, it's all the setup, all the additional time taken to get over your events list that would always change. It was like a lot simpler because I didn't want to retire, didn't want to stop altogether for having a kid. I was just like, powerlifting, 3 events, in a platform, you know, train it anywhere. It's going to take you 10 minutes to set up if you're lucky. And it's always the same stuff no matter what gym you go to, whether it's a deadlift bar, a bench, a squat rack. It's like, it's all just variations, but everyone's got it. So yeah, moved over from there. I was just like, yeah, that's the sport for me. Eventually, a couple of years in, I think it was like 2019, was it? We did Eastbourne?
Yeah, I think it was about that.
Came away from like my first sort of like real comp, like stepping out of the gym. Like, spent a few years just keeping my head down, thinking I'm quite strong. Like, I'm in a room full of people a lot bigger than me. I'm quite strong. And that was the first time I sort of stepped out and went, what am I like on a British stage, or where would I rank amongst, I think it was like 4th or 5th in the UK at that point. It's like, okay, yeah, we could push this. This could be fun. Like, I thought, you know, I was expecting like 15th, 20th, something, you know, really like could do better. I was like 4th or 5th, yeah, just outside the positions. Like, yeah, let's do that. And yeah, pushed on from there to do full power championship. Took on in 22 for British. That was my first victory. Just clinched that on the last deadlift. I went back last year for 23 and came in 3rd overall, which still not terrible, but not where I wanted to be. But it gave me a bit of awakening to say, yeah, I'd had a bit of a bad day with it. I'd come through and missed some fairly routine lifts. So I'd missed a regular squat, I'd missed a regular bench. I knew I couldn't win by the time I got into the 3rd round. I knew I couldn't get that victory anymore, but I still came out all fired up and excited and ready to lift, like the demon was still there to go and push it. And I was like, and I walked away from the day going, well, if that's the bit I'm still enjoying, that's the bit I still want to do so much, why am I doing the other 2 bits anymore? I've sort of proven to myself I can do it. I've taken a victory, I've taken a 3rd place. It's not a bad place to be, to go, you know what, how hard can I push this one aspect of the lift? Can I take a record in it? Can I set some new standards for it? Can I work with it? And I just want to compete a few more years until, you know, I know what my absolute top end is with it. So the last question I've got in that sport is, how far can I push it?
And where do you think that limit is?
At the moment, chasing the record for November this year, So I'm hoping to beat the 265 record for 75 kilo, which should be fairly doable, I think. From that, I want to move on to the equipped deadlifting and try and get further and further ahead with that, so I can push it, see if I can't take a record or two in that. I think my absolute limit, I don't really want to say it out loud because it sort of vocalises it.
Okay.
It sort of puts it out, puts it out there. I'm thinking 300 kilos at 75 kilo body weight, so 4 times body weight bang on is what I'm thinking is my sort of dream limit if I really turn up the wick. It depends how I get on with the suit realistically. It's still a bit of a grey area, and it's not something I've said out loud before really. It's just been at the back of my brain going, a 300 would be disgusting at 75 kilos. It would be absolutely...
It would.
It'd be an absolutely sort of shocking lift to see, but like, yeah, God, so it's sort of back in there, back of my mind going, you see how the other things go, and if you're in that region, if I can do the record I want after this one, it's only going to be a 15 kilo increase in like physical lift, which is a lot because, you think on average you're pulling like 2.5 kilo on a best each time. So it's going to take a year or two to get there, but it should be possible, shouldn't it?
Everything's possible if you believe it. Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to believe it. No, I'm just going to, I'm going to work for it and then see what happens. That's the better route.
Oh, yeah.
Just know that you've got a good chance at it, but nothing's cast in stone with lifting. Nothing at all.
So what I'm thinking is, going back to when you started deadlifting, could you have even imagined the weights that you're pulling now?
When I first started, I worked a little differently to some people because there was a lot of people like social media lifting and getting excited and, oh look, I've pulled 180, oh look, this is me 150 best, and nothing against anyone's best. If it's your best effort, it's to be, you should be cheered, rewarded. It is as good as anyone else's best effort as long as you're giving it everything. I never scoff at someone who says, oh, I've just got a 210. Well done, mate. It's not, it's your personal effort. It's how you've got there and how you're doing it. I worked slightly differently in that I said initially, I will not record a deadlift until it's over 200 kilos. That was my flat goal before I'd even put a camera on it, was I'm going to pull 200 kilos. But at that time, when I started training, as I said, I was over at Zeus's and there was a lot of bigger lads around. So the average weight was about between the 90 kilo lifters, the 105s, a couple of 120 lifters in there for body weight. And we were sharing the platform. So that was the benchmark I was seeing around me. So for me, it was, just push until you can't. It was like I wouldn't bother filming it below 200 because by what I was surrounded with, there wasn't a lot of sort of like interim lifters or lighter weight lifters at the time in there. It was, you're either a big lad lifting heavy things or you stayed off the platform. It was only a 1.5 size platform back then. So we didn't have the two like twin so it was like, it was a lot
smaller.
more, so smaller, you were sharing the equipment more. And you had to be like, if you're going to be noticed or someone was going to care, you had to be pulling something worth pulling. So my attitude was sub 200, I just wouldn't put a camera near it, I wouldn't record it. It wasn't an effort. So it just developed from there. It just became, right, what more can I do? What more can I do? It was only like some years into it. So maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I've pulled my first 262. And, I thought, yeah, it's pretty good. That's all right. But my mentality was just in the gym I was in. So as much as I was like, it's all right, well, that big bloke's out pulling me. That big bloke's out pulling me. And my mind, I didn't look at the outside world as to what that sort of equated to outside of my own lunchtime. I was only looking at what was around us. I'm going, oh, I should be beating him. There's no reason in the game of powerlifting I should be beating him at all. Like the power to weight ratio was through the roof, but it didn't matter. It was like, it just took a long time to build up to be like, yeah, I'm good at this. I'm still pushing now, so it's going all right.
At what point did you realise that other people your weight are not lifting anywhere near what you're lifting?
Well, also I had tunnel vision for a long time as to where I was and what I was lifting with. So it was years. It really was years. It was like, I'm going for the record again this year, and I've tried to pull this lift in 2019. You were there. I tried to outpull the record without knowing it was a record because I hadn't opened my eyes to it. I never thought, I'm in the realms of pulling a British record. I thought, all right, what can I go for? I think I landed a 260 on the platform on the second lift. So that was the day finished. And I was like, 270, yeah, we'll have a go at I'd never pulled a 270 before, but I felt like, it was a really good day for pulling. I'd had a really good run on that day. I was like, yeah, go on then. It would have been a 5 kilo record on the British record. Didn't know. Didn't know until like a couple of years later that I'd already attempted it on the platform in the right equipment. It only struck me like a couple of years later when I was looking through and went, oh, hang on. And as I say, when I looked at the league table afterwards, when I'd like, sort of ranked, I was like, oh wow, I'm a lot higher up this than I thought I was. I thought of myself like a normal gym user, like someone who, yeah, they do some heavy lifting, but they'll also mix it with the cardio, some calisthenics, just having fun with it and progress. I wasn't like, oh yeah, dead serious tunnel vision. It was a bit of a like light bulb moment checking out and going, oh yeah, I can do this. I'm actually within a range where a bit more work in this area and this area. So at that time it was make the squat stronger, make the bench stronger, and that way I could be more well-rounded. Because I was obviously lopsided in my lifting for full power. It was always going to come down to the final round of what was coming off the deadlift as to where I'd position.
Yeah.
I could be walking in second or third or first into the last round, but it was always going to be that speciality that put me over the top. And it was like, yeah, there you go. Have a go. See what, just check it out and go, oh yeah, if I look past my own lunchtime, yeah, I'm a lot further on than I thought I was.
So you mentioned that in total you've gained about 2 kilos of weight, is that right? Since you started?
3 if you're lucky, yeah, that's it.
So how do you develop such amazing strength without packing on so much size?
I really don't know the answer to that. In fairness, I walked in, so for the background, I walked into the gym having done Hastings half marathon. I was at a point in my life where I needed something to do, and that was presented to us as a charity run. I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So I trained for it, I pushed for it. I took my weight down to like 71 kilo when I walked into Zeus's. That was when I was absolutely, completely standard. Just I'd cut the fat for running because I've been training like 4 or 5 times a week, and obviously 13-mile run around Hastings isn't easy. So I prepped all that, I come back through, and it was at that point I went, okay, let's get into a gym and just tone what we've got, maybe add a little bit for just aesthetics, because I put the work in by then. I was like, okay. And over the years, I've just developed the strength, the power, technique, and it's just been a constant cycle of like overtraining and pushing hard. But calorifically, it's nothing uncomfortable. Admittedly, for competitions and things, there's a bit of a weight cut to do, but nothing too major. You're talking maybe 3-4 kilos on a really bad run. It's just my natural body weight sits at around 70 kg. So to stay within the bounds of that's not been that difficult. It's not been at the forefront of my mind. It's just been constant as I've been training the same basic style for nearly a decade.
That leads me on to what I was going to ask about your training. Like, how regimented are you with it? And how has that sort of changed over the time you've been doing it?
Regiment for training is constant. I really struggle to miss a session. If I plan it out and I use a coach, I have done for quite a few years. Initially, when I first started, it was like pretty much anyone in the gym. It was like, just have a go. You think you know better than anyone else because you've got the arrogance of youth behind you. So you'll go on the internet and you'll find a program that worked in the 80s. And you'd be like, I'm doing 2 runs on the Eddie Cohen deadlift. How many people have you seen on that program, and how many have you seen them succeed on that program? It's really low because there's no one there to help them with it, sort it out, watch the technique, anything like that. And that was it. I ran through and through with that. I was very excitable for a few years, then eventually settled in with a coach and went, right, okay, how can we push to get better? So initially my first coach helped me get my squat sorted and my bench sorted to get them up to power, to get them sort of more even so I could compete better and sort of rise that table. And then my current coach is focusing now solely on deadlift, but we were doing full power before that. And it's just pushing with the regiment. I don't want to miss a session. I want to be in. I want to hit my numbers. I'm upset if I can't hit the numbers, especially if someone else has set them for me. So if they're written out and I go, that is what I should be doing today, that's what I want to achieve.
That's what you're doing.
I've become better over the years as well, because initially you'd have your days where you think, I'm feeling really good today. I know it says 240 on here, but I reckon I've got this next one. As I've stopped doing all of that by this point, it is literally, what am I supposed to do? This. Okay, that's what I'm doing. I'm not going to argue with it. I'm not going to question it. I'll look at it and go, but I'm still going to step up every time and try it. I think, right, in most cases you're going to get through it, because if it's designed right for you, it's designed right for you. If it's not, you've got to have that discussion, but you've got to at least try. You can't just look at a number and go, not today, mate. just doesn't work for me.
So I wanted to talk about like mentors. And would you say when you first stepped into that gym and you were surrounded by bigger guys and they sort of dictated the weight that you felt that 200 kilos was an acceptable weight, would you see those people as your mentors at that time?
Yeah, they were definitely pushing the pace in the gym. They were lifting the heaviest stuff, and like the entire thing of this game, of any sort of strength program, is to lift the heaviest. And let's say, if you're tunnel visioned into what's around you, that's who you're going to look up to. They were the people that were correcting me on my technique, my form, if I was taking too long of breaks. They were on me for that sort of thing. Not always in the nicest ways. There was a lot of shouting back then, but it helped. I can't say it didn't help too. You pull a miserable looking deadlift and someone pulls you up and goes, right, this is how you do it properly. You're flagging, you're blowing out your arse because you've got it wrong. So you've winded yourself, and it's like, right, here you go, now do it. It's an old school way of learning, but it's an effective way of learning. So to me at the time, yeah, there was a lot of admiration around for, right, how do I impress those guys? Because it's their gym. I'm just one bloke who's wandered in, I've just started. Can I get up to a mark that's like, oh yeah, everyone's on board with you, they know what you like, they know what you're doing, they're going to stand up for you, say like, oh, he's a good lifter, he is. Because regardless if you think you don't want it or not, it's a part of gym life. It's nice to get that respect from other lifters, from other people in the game, to be like, oh, he's really good at that. And you're like, it feels like it's on a par for like someone you really respect or look up to, especially on a global scale or like the bigger picture, and they're like, oh, he's a specialist and he's really good, watch him. You're like, oh, it's like the PB feeling. It's like that excitement, like, he said I was good. Is it? He's really good, and he said I was good. You're like, it sort of rubs on, you get that excitement. So yeah, I agree. Yeah, they were sort of like the big brotherish moments of like, all right, okay, yeah, I'm working with you. You're twice my size. Come on then, let's get it going. But it has sort of rubbed on in like later years for lifting, as I've been at it nearly a decade, and there's a lot of people come up to say to you, oh, can you have a look at this? Can you see the technique on this? Or I've just got this. And you're like, all right, yeah, do you want a spot? Do you need a hand? Would you like any help with it? Because for me, the priority is safety in the bigger stuff. It's fun pulling big deadlifts. It's not fun pulling them badly. It's not fun to see someone get hurt, get injured, or if they're looking up to you in the same light and going, he can do it, I can do it. It's not to be. You've got to be there and be. You have to, as much as some people look at you like, no, don't want it, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But if someone says, oh, can you have a look at my deadlift? Yeah, let's get a session in, get you on half weights, get you comfortable, make sure your bracing's good, your positioning's good, you're not straining in any way you shouldn't. Come back to me in a couple of months, come back 6 months and say, look at this new best I've got. I'm right on you, you've got it, it's perfect. But it's having that sort of opposite mentality from now I'm getting a bit older, where I look at it and go, can I help someone if they want it? I probably can. Yeah, I absolutely will. Because it helps push the sport, it helps push you, and it makes a better gym to be in.
It does, yeah. It does really help that community environment in a gym. So what about today? Who are your biggest mentors today?
Coach-wise, I've got Craig Wellis, he was a phenomenal deadlifter. He was only a weight class above me, and he's a mad animal. I met at a competition a couple of years back with an absolute fuck you attitude to basically everyone who wasn't someone he knew. So I went over and said hello, and we got on from there. Just two short tattooed idiots with beards, like couldn't go wrong. So I sort of set into him. Biggest at the moment, and I think he knows it, is a bloke called Paul the Wall Beatty.
Okay.
Don't know if you follow him.
I haven't heard of him, no.
Really nice bloke, really incredible lifter. He's an animal at his size. He is as wide as he is tall. But a couple of times he's really picked me up in competition. Okay, I did the 2022. I missed my second deadlift for just almost not putting the effort in. Going out there thinking, this is a routine lift. And the brain switched off from being, this is really important to you, this is the difference between first and second, and I went out and just didn't pull the lift at all. And it was nothing of a weight in reality, but because mentally I'd switched off, it didn't happen. So I went backstage for my next lift. Another lifter comes out and takes the first place spot off me, and I've been sat there all day, just sort of the switch off, like, I've got this, I'm going into my speciality, I'm not going to be touched now, that's it. And I was. So he took first place going into the final lift, like called Marius, really nice lad. Went in and yeah, I was sat there going, right, the lift I've just missed is now do or die. There's no other option on it. Is I either get that last lift I've just missed, which is difficult on the brain. It's hard to go from missing it to, right, I've got to pull this. Got to the backstage and everyone's in their own heads. Everyone's sort of set out, getting ready for their next lift. They're all waiting the time out. And I've got Paul the Wall stood there just telling me, you can do this, mate. You can do this. It's yours. You go get it. You are going to get this lift. I am right after you. I want to see you get that lift. I'm going, yeah, thank you, mate. Little pat on the shoulder, passes me the chalk. Out I go. Yeah, I got the lift. But it's so nice to have another competitor there who I'd not met before that day. Hadn't met him before, and he's just, yeah, you can do that. Like, I needed that little pep talk. But there was no one around to give me that little pep talk, because everyone else is lifting and lifting against me. He was a weight category above, which didn't make much difference because he's an animal. But he's just pats you on the shoulder. And then last year, when I said I came through and just ended up cocking the day up completely, I came into the deadlift round. He'd lifted that morning. He assumed the handler position for us. So between every round, there's just two short northern blokes shouting at each other. Every time we're stood in the area, waiting to, sort of staring at the bar, getting ready for bar loaded, sort of stomping about. And you've just got a bloke and you're like, you can lift it, you're going to lift it, get out there and lift it, it's yours, it's no one else's, you can do it. And the others shouting back and forth at each other, and then going out and trying to get the lifts. Incredible bloke, and really, like, a really good hero of mine, because he's he's really nice, really genuine. He was basically there just waiting for the award ceremony at the end by that point. He had nothing else doing, but he just went, handed off the toddler to his missus. Right, come on Graham, I've got you. Arm round the shoulder, away you go. And I'll always look up to him. One name from the past, especially in the strongman days, not often heard of these days, Daniel Claxton, absolute animal of a bloke. He's not been around for a few years, I think, with a back injury.
Okay.
He does keep posting that he's coming back occasionally. Phenomenal athlete, really nice guy. When I was doing strongman, if he turned up to an event, you were taking second. The fight for first was gone. I think he was 3-time UK champion at 80 kilos. So he turned up, it was like, nah, you're all right. He took to turning up to local events, so if he was doing like a local competition, he turned up being 80 kilos and compete in open weight.
Okay.
So that he could have fun and try his events and push himself, but he wasn't hurting the scene, if you know what I mean. It was a really humble attitude to have, rather than going, I'm the British champion, I'm going to come in and do your local competition and I'm going to annihilate everyone. And there was that serious feeling of, oh, no. No matter how hard you pushed, you couldn't. I once saw a bloke do a deadlift round in desperate need for the toilet.
Okay.
It was reps in a minute, and I think it was something like 220, 230 reps. And he was in serious need of the toilet. So just before the event, he's popped his belt open to give himself a little bit of breathing room, bashed out 10, 11 reps.
Yeah.
Judge called time on the minute and he just sprinted to the toilet. He sort of like waddled off at full speed. I was like, that's incredible to see someone do. He's just like, he knew it was time to compete. He had no choice, but he just needed a little bit more breathing room. So he pops the belt open so it's loose and just, reps him out and ran off. But it's mostly, for me, the people that I look up for these days are the ones with the right attitude. It's not necessarily who's lifting the most. If you don't carry yourself, you don't carry the sport well, and you're not supportive of others, if you're the one who turns up and it's just all about you, it's your lift, it's your day, I'm going to do that. Have a little look around. You're all in the same competition doing the same thing. It's nothing to say, eat your lunch with your fellow competitors. Every time I can, it's just nice to have that little downtime where it's not like staring at someone all grumpy and sort of fiery-eyed at them going, oh, I hope you missed that lift. You should never hope someone misses a lift. You should always be in that situation where they're going to push you. Of course, in that final, I was absolutely gutted I'd missed my second lift, but the fire it brought in me to get the third one, to go back out and get it, was through the roof. It had to be done. It was that, or it wasn't happening.
How has powerlifting affected your life, and how has it changed the trajectory of your life?
It's helped a lot. It's been something constant in life that I can look for, like constant progression. Like work life, social life, everything else is almost on a path. It is hard to break the bounds of something, especially when it's work related, something like that. If you're working for a company, there's only so high you're ever going to be able to reach before you have to take massive risks, massive leaps, and sort of massive financial sort of turmoil to sort of push past, short of wanting to work for yourself or something like that. And for me, it's always been something in the background that I've had, that I can work at. It's only determined by how much work and effort I'm going to put in. So the amount of time I spend in the gym, or the time I was put on the platform, or the work, the effort, the days where it hurts and it's horrible and it's achy, and I'm completely in control of that. That's how it's helped me more than anything else. It's been really positive for that, and it's brought a lot of confidence forward for, you're going in for your job interviews, you're going in for trying to improve your day, you're going for a pay rise, it really helps your sense of self-worth when you've been putting in the work and the effort into something. It really shines through in your confidence.
Yeah, and how has that sort of affected you in other things as well? Like, is there other avenues where you felt like that confidence has really helped you overcome things?
It's helped me out in job interviews and things like that. It's helped me feel like it's hard to express, really. It's not something I've really put too much thought into, in that I try and compartmentalise things like my training, day-to-day life, work-wise. There's carryover, but not a huge amount. If you're coming in a good mood because you've lifted something, it's going to show in your day, but it's only going to show for the amount of time you're still excited about that lift or that session. So you can start, for me, I'll start the day very happy and see just how it goes from there, as to whether it peaks, troughs, how it goes, as the excitement sort of wears off from that work.
So let's say there's an alternate universe where you didn't start lifting.
Yeah.
What do you think you'd be doing?
The alternate universe. I like the alternate universe. There almost was an ultimate universe where I wasn't lifting. For the full background on like my sporting sort of nature, I started out as a competitive swimmer as a kid. So I did club level, county level and British level in swimming until I came away with a few sort of common swimming injuries.
Okay.
So I left with flat foot in both feet, so I have no arches left anymore, which then causes reverberation issues for kneecaps and hips, because there's nothing to take the initial shock or impact of any sort of solid ground training, which led into varicose vein surgery in my 20s.
Okay.
So I had to retire from swimming at the age of about 14, 15.
Wow.
Because I couldn't rebuild the muscle needed to regain what my legs had lost. I spent a good year and a half, 2 years trying to get there. But by the time I got back to where I was, the field had moved up and up because they were still pushing while I was pushing. So I ended up walking away from it and retiring. So I had a few years in between where I trained nothing. Under like the doctor's recommendation, it was like, your sporting days are done. You're not going to be competitive in anything anymore. Eventually I found just a standard sort of pure gym, 24/7 gym set up, went in there and went, I still want to do something. I'm too young to retire completely. I couldn't just go, no, that's it, we're done. I'm not just going to be injured forever. I'm just going to rehabilitate the leg. I'm going to work around the knee muscle. I'm going to try and get everything built up so that I can get back on my feet and do something. I hadn't decided what something was yet, but I wanted to work on it and get back on my feet. Eventually, after a year or so in there, one of the bigger lads went, oh, hey, Graham should try this Muay Thai class. And I'd done no cardio since swimming. There's a 4 or 5 year gap on anything cardio, and my lifting at that point was terrible. It was all rehabilitation, and then it became, oh, I can bench my own body weight, I'm amazing. I can squattish, I'd happily squat in a Smith machine at that point in my life, yeah, that's really good, that, yeah. And went in and did an hour of this, and I was on my backside. I was absolutely put on my arse by it. I was just sweating and heavy breathing. I was like, oh yeah, go on, let's get into that. And I did for 2.5, 3 years. Trained over at Chorley Thai Kickboxing, instructor called Trevor Hine, absolute legend, really nice bloke. Messaged me, I think, after the British title just to say well done. I hadn't trained with him in 7 or 8 years. Yeah. Barely any contact with him, and it was just this random message out of the blue, the personal message saying, well done, really well done, just sticking with it. You were always going to go well in our sport, not necessarily mine, but in our sport. And it was really nice. Just like, that's really nice, it's really nice that amount of time later for someone to still be watching over you, be out for you, who has instructed you over time. So I did Thai boxing and then moved down to the south. I'd had the varicose vein surgery in between that gap, so it was do the Thai boxing Chorley area and then moved down here, and I just didn't have a sport at that point. I came back in, I was like, Okay, and eventually the half marathon popped up. So there's been a lot of like small gaps in between and progressive points where I didn't, there was no training for me, or I was told I shouldn't be training, or you can't compete because you're hurt. And yes, I will always be hurt. The feet will never heal. The knee's always going to be rough, and it's sort of a mind over matter of I can still push, I can still go, and until the wheels fall off, we're going to keep going.
What was that surgery like, the varicose vein surgery?
It was a 2.5 hour conscious surgery to have all the valves in my legs. So I think 19 local anaesthetics up and down the inside of my legs. So if you ever see the small scars all the way up and down, had the valves heated and resealed so that they would. It was a long recovery and it wasn't very nice, but I was sort of kickboxing with veins popping out nearly 1/2 inch out of my leg. So it was restricted mobility as well because I couldn't move the leg as well for the sort of the veins kicking in and sort of giving it a limitation that I really didn't want. So it was quite painful to have beforehand. It was a long recovery and it was a painful session, but it was worth it. I mean, I have opened a few of them back up over the years, which isn't a massive surprise given what we do.
Yeah.
I'm putting a lot of circulation through and a lot of muscle power through the body. So they do sort of reappear every now and again, but not in any way as painful or as bad as it was.
And I just want to go back to so you were 14 when you were told you can't swim ever again. How does 14-year-old Graham feel in that moment?
A little bit gutted because I'd been working at it for sort of 7 or 8 years by that point. It'd been a long progression to get up through club level, county level, and to like the British level. So there was a part of me that was, really gutted that I couldn't rebuild the muscle. I couldn't get my arms to be powerful enough to carry my legs in the way the legs used to carry the arms. And retirement wasn't the nicest thought, but there's also, being like a young teenager, there's a slight feeling of relief where you've gone, okay, I've been doing sort of like up to 10 hours a week of training for this. And all of a sudden it's like, you don't have to do that anymore. Like, oh yeah, brilliant. I could do so much stuff. Your mind sort of wanders off with it. So after all that dedication, it was gutting. And I didn't really, at that age, you don't really process things as well as you should. I think it was like the 2012 Olympics in London when they were about, there's a couple of like the county swimmers that were there. One of my good friends was, he was in the water polo team in the opening for it, and you're going, wow, for the grace of injury, that's when it sort of, my brain went, that could have been where I was at by this point. Should I have kept on the same path and I wasn't hurt? That was where everything was leading to. And obviously it just took that many years really to grow up a bit and be like, oh yeah, that was where it was going. So it was devastating, but also, I say, as a teenager, you think, oh, I don't have to do something. Oh, brilliant.
So, because I was going to ask, because you sound like you've been very active for most of your life, but you had that brief period where you weren't active, you weren't pursuing a sport. I was going to ask, did you feel like there was something missing? It sounded like you found it quite a relief.
For a few years, there was a bit of relief to it. It was like a couple of years ago, yeah, okay, I can just enjoy being out on my push bike. I can go out on my skateboard. I can do, and if I get hurt, I get hurt. It's like, it wasn't like, oh, you get out on your skateboard, you've got 6 sessions of swimming you're going to miss, and that's going to put this back, and it's going to affect this competition, this gala, this race. It was always on the back of your mind. So it was really freeing for a couple of years, but then the mind started to wander, and like I say, I wandered back into a gym on the knowledge that I wanted to rebuild and do something. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what sport it'd be. I didn't know, it was never going to be Muay Thai because that wasn't in my brain cells. It wasn't going to be powerlifting. It wasn't going to be strongman. It was just a compulsion to get back in there and go, look, I can live a better life if I'm more mobile and more active, if I'm more able to do things. I'd had my list of restrictions from the doctor. And at one point I'm told I'm not allowed to climb a step ladder, and I'm going, yeah, I'm not gonna carry on like that. That's not a choice I'm gonna make in my sort of 19, 20-year-old self going, you can't climb a step ladder. That's going to restrict anything you can do going forward. So that was sort of the push for me, was get back in the gym and get working, because I can give myself more mobility, I can get stronger, and I can just pick what I want to do from there. There's always been like a fire burning that has to be fed. There's something I always want to be doing something. I'm like looking towards my retirement from lifting in years to come, and I already know what my planning is for when that happens. It's all staging down from full power to just deadlift, which is where we are now. Get the things I want to achieve in deadlift done, and I've sort of vowed to meet my first sort of gym goal. So post all the lifting and all the competitive stuff is to tone up and put a bit of size on, which is what I set out to do 10 years ago, but failed at miserably. It's still in the ether for me. It's still around that I want to get that done before I retire to old bloke in the gym who knows what he's doing. You know, the bloke he may not be pushing the biggest lifts, but he can tell you how to do it. I'm happy to grandfather myself like that and just be, he was good once, but not still be on the platform doing it. It's one of my bigger fears is being the old bloke at the competition. You're like, oh, well done, mate. Well done. He was great 5 years ago. I want to stop myself before I get to there and become sort of the legacy lifter at the back that everyone, like a mascot. We've seen them at all line of sports. There's always someone there who isn't, they're not up to the competitive game anymore, but they're still doing it. And, you know, fair play to it. If they're still enjoying it, it's fine, but it's not for me. I want to be pushing ahead or just call it a day.
So as a whole, what does the deadlift mean to you?
It's been a nice progressive thing. It's something that when starting out, it became the front liar in my lifting. It became the thing I was progressing at the fastest, I was the most comfortable with, and I was enjoying doing it. And it's become over the years, it's just chasing the next goal. It's a really nice lift, a really good compound lift for the body, just to chase what's next, what the next number is, and just keep pushing it and pushing to see what I can do now. I've spent so many years with it. I've plateaued for a few years and had a real struggle with it. But in that time, I pushed up the power of the squat, the power of the bench came up, the championship came through. So it wasn't a wasted set of time. I was sort of resting on what I could deadlift. I knew what it was, but I was just stuck at 262 for about 3 or 4 years. Could not get past it to save my life. And then in the last couple of years, it's been progression on progression on progression. And it's just nice to know you're putting in the work, you're getting the result, you're getting the reward of it. Unfortunately, I think after 10 years in, the reward period's gone down a bit. Like the amount of time where you get the lovely sort of hit in the brain of, yeah, I got that, that's amazing. It can last some days, it can be until I've put the bar back down and gone, right, what's next? You know, that next drive comes in really early. By now, it's just sort of like, okay, that's 275, amazing, right, when's the 280 going to happen? Yeah. You know, your brain, it's like, but then it's all dependent on your love of like your lifting, your training, anything like that. If you know the big stuff's exciting, the competition days, race days, that sort of thing, really exciting, but there's something to be said for enjoying the grind. When you know you've got hard sets, hard sessions, hard work, if you're into it and you can just get yourself in that position, that zone where you just train, it's going to happen. You know, you're going to push yourself and then you get to enjoy that little moment at the end where it's, in the case of this, there'll be 100+ lifts before I'm back around to the next big one. It's like a 3-4 month gap as a minimum. But a long steady build up to get ready for the next bigger one, and it's that lovely release at the end of it, but also that feeling of, right, next week it starts again. You know, next week we're back in and we're back on all the sets, and it's back on 5x5s, and it's back on pause deficits, and it's a progressive thing.
And do you find that attitude kind of bleeds over to other parts of your life?
Yeah, I'm not willing to. I'm a very stubborn sort of geezer when it comes to giving up on things. If I'm told that you can't, or you know, it's not possible to do that physically, yeah, I reckon we can do it. I'll always push forwards and see what I can't do. If it's something you can be trained in or something you can work towards, it's just taking the right size bites of the cherry. It's not trying to set your sights to, you know, if you're going for a company and you're like, okay, I'm going to start mailroom, don't go, I'm going to CEO straight away. Yeah. You know, it's working out that in 2 years' time, you might be on the next floor up. And then you work at it and just chip away at things. It's carried through for the rest of my days as to what I do is I'm not willing to just walk away from something and go, that's it. It's a long, long time and a lot of patience before you can walk off and go, I'm done with something.
So in the processes of, you sound like you got your lifting very calculated. You know exactly what you're going to be doing each session.
Yeah. What
about the diet and other components towards that?
Diet is not too bad. My body weight sort of now, it sits around like 77, 78 for most of the time, and cut back down sort of 3-4 kilos to get for competition. When it's at sort of 78s and 77s, it's when there's a bit of junk food in there, so there's a bit of enjoyment. So pizzas, cakes, burgers, you know, as long as it's kept within sort of like 2 or 3 things a week, I can keep consistently lifting, I can enjoy what I'm doing. It's only when it gets down to sort of competition time, it becomes, all right, let's get rid of the red meat, let's get off, you know, do you fancy one of these? No, I'm all right. Just say no to a few things, and then eventually a small water cut, and then, yeah, back on the platform. So it's not uncomfortable to do. It's not like it's constantly on the back of my mind. I'm not one for protein powders and potions and pills. I don't think they're effective. I don't see how I can buy a jar in Holland and Barrett that's going to make me somehow much stronger than I am or recover faster. Or I've never really bothered with it. If I buy protein, I'll do half of it, and then 2 months later I'm throwing it away because it's been sat there untouched for 2 months. I will just leave it on the shelf because it doesn't appeal to me. It doesn't feel like it's something you need. So it just means that diet is controlled entirely by me. If I know I've been being an idiot and eating all the wrong things, I'm going to suffer for that, and I'll suffer for that on the cross trainer or the treadmill or whatever it may be I use to cut the weight down. But day to day, it's absolutely fine. It's like a back thought of your mind. You know, yeah, within sensibility, I don't want to count macros. I don't want to live my life like that. I'm a little bit of a traditionalist in my lifting. It's not, you know, I will always gun out and struggle through a big lift if I have to, if it's the big day. But I don't want to have to live my life going, oh, it's got 3 more macros than I'm allowed today. I'd rather just yes or no my food. If it's, do you fancy one of these? Oh, I've not got a comp for 2 months. Yeah. You know what, should we have pizza tonight? Yeah, let's have pizza. Don't make yourself miserable. My biggest sort of, not gripe, but the thing I learned years ago from all the old boys was the old chicken and rice days where everyone's, that's the best you'll ever do, just chicken and rice and chicken and rice. And as I was having a conversation with someone recently, he said, oh, I keep trying to do it, but I keep falling off the wagon. I'm not surprised. You've got the same steamed chicken, the same steamed rice every day. How do you do it? If I do meal prep, I just put some bleeding sauce with it. Yeah, the extra calories is going to weigh out on the amount of days you can continue to do something. If you're only facing the same chicken and rice dish 5 days in a row, by day 3, you don't want to eat it anymore. If it's gone from barbecue to sweet and sour to Korean, it's got a different flavour, different scent, different texture. It makes a huge difference. And that's how I've always tried to do it, because it's more enjoyable, but also what you can sustain and do for longer is much more beneficial to you than the last minute, oh, I can do that. You're going to fall off that wagon fast.
So before we started recording, you told me about the lift that you broke your teeth on. Would you talk about that, how it happened?
So I went into my last big deadlift, which was a 275. It was a lot of strain on the body, and unfortunately the weakest part of the body gave out on me. So as I'm coming up to lock the lift out, I've over clenched my teeth, basically, giving it a big grip, and I've managed to crack and fracture 2 of the teeth at the back, which was a very painful day out, to be fair. I got my lift, so I was quite happy with the world. It was only a couple of days later I realised, when I couldn't really go to sleep, I was sort of pacing around going, ouch. Went to the dentist and he's, yeah, you've broken 2 teeth. Thankfully, my dentist is also a gym user, so he does understand. It's a lot easier to have one of those if you can. If you can get a lifter dentist, he really covers the how did you do this section, tick, because trying to explain that to someone outside of that system wouldn't make any sense at all when there's no physical impact. But the long and short of it was sort of a 2-month wait between getting it filled and getting them repaired or removed. So I've had sort of rough 2 months of training where it's just been a bit difficult, a little bit painful in places. Again, sort of the gun it out mentality that it's not going to get much better for us at that point. So do what you can and push as you do. Eventually I had to have the 2 teeth removed, which was last Friday. Ended up with 2 infections and an abscess at the time. So it was been a fairly rough month for training, but we're back on it now. As soon as we're recovered and cleared and the antibiotics are done, we'll be back up to full power.
And the reason why I brought that up is because we were talking about the diet, and we've touched upon the sleep. And the sleep is I found that one of the biggest components to me feeling and performing my best. How have you found sleep with your training? Has it ever been a struggle for you? How has it been?
Going to sleep switching off is absolutely fine. Unlike some people in this game, I work full time. I'm a dad of I've got a 6-year-old son, married, and I train. So as you know, but other people won't, my training starts at 6 a.m. So I'm pulling my deadlifts, I'm doing my squats, everything else. I go sort of 6 a.m. until about 7:45. So I start off in the morning bright and early, which often leads to less sleep than is ideal. Again, I think it's just the old school mentality of, you know, you want to do it, you're going to do it. There's not a lot you will feel better for having more sleep. You will feel better if you've got your recommended dailies of things, but there's still a mentality for me of, right, I'm going to go and do that. That's today's score. I'm never going to go, oh, well, I've only had 5 hours sleep. I won't preload an excuse in that regard. I'd rather get to the bar, have my little pre-workout, get all excited, have my smelling salts and go, right, okay, I could lift that today, or I couldn't lift that today. What was the component? Then you start to look back on what really hampered you. Obviously, with the tooth injury, there was a lot that was hampering me. There was no searching for the excuse. I knew what was going to hold me back, but it didn't mean that I wasn't going to push. I wasn't going to try and get done what I could get done. And in a lot of regards, for the last 2 months, I have got my lifts in. I've still made the numbers I want to. Admittedly, they're not as fast as I'd like them to be, but that's just me being sort of negative to how I do things. No matter it's always how it feels over how it looks. So how it felt to lift it versus what it looks like playing it back is the more important feeling for me. If it felt like a horrible grind and it doesn't translate to camera, that's fantastic. You know, that's fantastic for anyone else to watch and go, oh, you smashed that. That was so easy for you. And you're taking your belt off and nearly falling on the floor. And you're like struggling around the room going, no, not good, not good. But anyone else will sit and go, oh, that's great, that. You've hit that. And it's a component you stick with for me is, you know that, you know, you've got to do it, you've got to do it. Sleep's as much as I can get it. Being a family man, you don't always get a choice. There's always something that's going to wake you up, whether it's the kid or the dog. You know, the amount of times that dog's woken me up at like 4:30, 3 in the morning because he's used to me getting up at 4:30 on a day when I could have rested. And I'm like, okay. So my natural attitude is, all right, I've got to get up because I've got to stop him waking the rest of the house up. I'm going to take it easy. I'll get 40 minutes of cardio in. You know, there's nothing stopping me from, I'm already awake, ahead of where I want to be. I can go down the gym, I can hit the treadmill gently, I can play the silly mobile phone games you're going to play, or check on the emails, or, you know, have a little bit of social time. If I can do that stood on a treadmill rather than stood in my kitchen, I'm getting some benefit back out of that loss of sleep. It's not just, oh, well, okay, it's on my way to work, isn't it? All right, yeah, get in the car, drive in, and I'll just be stood there, headphones on, listen to the music, and just, oh, yeah, match that symbol with that symbol. All right, that's it. Oh, I've finished that level. Okay. It's that sort of, it's just keeping everything sort of positive.
A lot of people would have just given up. What makes your mindset so that you can be consistent? What's different?
It's just a drive. I think it's just within you to just, if you want something and you're going to put it out there, there's only one way, with strength particularly, there's only one way you're going to reach it. If you want that sort of rewarding feeling and you want to know that you've done something, you know you've got to put the work in. It's getting comfortable putting the work in. It's being able to train when the conditions are against you. When you know the sleep's lower than it should be, when you know you've got a bit of pain, you've got an injury, something aches. If you can work around it, you can work with it, you can push past it. It's going to be so much more of a sort of like a positive feeling when you get through the end of it. I always thought the thing I've seen a lot of people sort of like fall on over the years is when they're not feeling as good about themselves and they go, okay, I'll just take this week off. I'm not feeling happy, I can't do it. And then that week leads to 2 weeks. They come back on the 3rd week and then they're furious because they've lost some part of their gains, they've lost some part of their drive, they're not back where they want to be, and then they fall off again. And eventually you'll run into these people like a few years down the line and you'll be like, oh, you're all right, mate, are you still training? Yeah, still going, mate. Oh, I gave up. I couldn't. Well, I know you gave up because you weren't there anymore. You know what I mean? I might have sent you a message to say, where are you? Like, I'll be back in next week, and next week never comes. So sort of the biggest mental push, like the biggest part of my mentality for that is, even if the world's against you, you're feeling down, you're feeling blue, is to just go out and get it done. Because coming back, when you're back up and you're positive, the last thing you want to do is feel like if you've missed like 2 weeks of training, you've come back in because you're positive again, you're going to resent yourself. You're going to be in a position where you're then more upset that you were upset. So you've missed out because you were feeling a bit depressed or a bit down. So even if I'm in a terrible mood, it'll be the big headphones on, in the back corner, just working through it at the speed I can. You know, like it might be doing the sets at twice the speed you should, reducing your rest, just because you're like bare minimal human contact them days, but it helps keep the consistency up. And then when you're back up and you're feeling like, yeah, I'm all right, world's good, you're not sat there resenting the times you don't feel good. You're just like, okay, I can do it. It's that constant sort of push and drive, and you want the reward, you've got to put the work in.
We were talking about supplements earlier.
Yeah.
We could talk about special supplements. So what are your views on steroids, and are you natural? I guess I should ask that first.
Lifetime natural, never taken anything that I shouldn't have. I'm an absolute sucker for caffeine. That's about it. I can't be bothered taking protein on a regular basis. I've got nothing against people using it as long as they're honest with it. If they're going to use it, absolutely fine. The analogy I always sort of look back to was like, yeah, watching the Olympics is great, and if someone can run 100 metres in 9 seconds, that's incredible. It's a beautiful thing to see. If someone can run it in 6.5 seconds and the quads explode because they're geared off the tits, that is also something to see. As long as they're declaring it. If they're going to run to pure destruction and you'll be like, how are they 2 seconds faster, and immediately collapse on the finish line, I still want to see that. I'm not against it at all, but I'd like to know that's what I'm watching.
Yeah.
No, like, you know, that spectacle's there. It's horses for courses. For me, it's a no-go. It's not something I want to do. It's not something I need to do, I don't think. I think I'm at a stage where, you know, I'm getting older, but I don't feel like I want to compete forever. I don't want to put my world through the changes that involves. You know, it harkens back to my sort of childhood of, I grew up with, my dad was an alcoholic. And, you know, it's a disease and it is horrible. It's a hard thing to grow up with. It's a hard thing to live with. But it was never the fact of what you could or couldn't do. It was the mood changes and the behaviour that affected my life and my growing up the most. Was the ability, you know, the flippant sort of nature of, oh no, everything's changed on a dime. He's gone from happy to sad, or oh, here comes the angries, and you'd be, you know, completely no control over it. And that's something that personally I wouldn't put my wife, my family through. I wouldn't want to be, and I'm not thinking like the stereotypical, oh, it's roid rage, that sort of thing. It's that mood shift. It's going to the gym day in, day out and seeing some of your best friends just be completely vacant to the world. Like, they've no qualms they're on something. They'll absolutely tell you what it is, how it is, and how much of it is if you want to know. But you can stand there and they'll be this distance away from you and staring a hole straight through you because they don't know you're there. It's that sort of mood changing, sort of like, it makes you really unpredictable. I just would not put my family through that sort of thing to get more lift. I'd rather log more time in the gym, more hours, more strain, than take not necessarily a shortcut, but to put it in my system. I've got a slight fear at this point that, you know, the injuries do rack up over time, and I'm pushing towards a limit of what my body can do. That's what each bigger lift is pushing more and more through your body. I worry about like the increased risk of injury from the additional growth, the fact the muscle's not got time to develop properly. It can be there, but the tendons won't be as strong and there won't be as much holding it to the frame. I don't want to be in that boat where I'm tearing stuff apart just to get that next little bit. All sort of serious sport is damaging to the body if you're pushing hard enough. I don't think you need to accelerate that in any way to push past it. I've been in gyms where I've received aggro and grief for being sober, or people, you know, come up and, oh yeah, he's lifted this, oh yeah, and he's done it sober. It's not a mark of respect or disrespect, just I understand the landscape these days it's almost more common to be on it than not. It's not, and yeah, there really shouldn't be a stigma about it. There really shouldn't. It should just be honest with it. If you're doing it, you're doing it. If you're not, you're not. Just don't sit on the fence, just either side. Thank you very much, no problem, because it could save a lot. And we were having a discussion only this week with what class as an old head in the gym. Someone who's been around for 30 plus years. And he was discussing with a group of us like the real youth, the people when they first come in, when they're sort of 17, 18, into the 20s, and they're jumping straight on stuff and they want to get as big as possible and they want to be the big man and they want to, and absolutely fine, everyone had those aspirations at some point. The same way that most of us in the strength sport probably watched World's Strongest Man as a kid over Christmas and went, I could do that one day. And part of me was that, you know, I saw it as an option. I was like, oh, I could be Magnus for Magnussen. You know, I could go back to that era and I sat around with that sort of bit of pride and a bit of excitement. And it was like the stigma needs to disappear from it on account of, there was a really nice phrase that was used by this sort of older head, was like, the kids don't need to make the mistakes they made. And it's the same with any sort of lifting, but you know, they'll go out and they'll do a dangerous amount of something that's very sort of non-beneficial or like really high health risk. Whereas there's an old boy in the corner who could have told them that half that measurement was the correct amount of that measurement. That information was right in front of them, but because they think there's a stigma that in reality isn't really there amongst people doing it, they could have saved themselves a whole lot of hurt, aggro, you know, health risk and danger. Just by going, yeah lad, yeah mate, excuse me, is this a good idea? This amount of this? No, it's not. You want to be on this amount of this, and you go, oh, thank you. And it's the same with big lifting. It's like, you know, I've done my days of shoddy technique when I first started, where it was pull it with everything. Was it the right time to? No. Was that going to hurt your back? Yeah, it was, you know. And going back, would I correct myself now? Of course I would. I would love to have had that older figure there on my shoulder going, hang on son, but you don't want to ask. You don't want to put yourself forward. And yeah, sort of my standpoint on it is, I think that a lot of the stigma needs to just disappear for it. Either way, I'm happy to compete in the clean leagues and I'm happy to test if required. If and when required, no problem, because I've always been sober. I intend to stay that way as far as my lifting's concerned. But I'd like to know definitively it's yes or it's no. It shouldn't be a problem from there. There should be no grief either side. You're playing with different results in different fields.
And how do you feel about someone who's maybe hiding it, that they're competing against you?
It's upsetting when you find out about it, but you know, it's just another thing to overcome, really. It's like, okay, it'll either come out in the wash, or without being cocky about it, I've not been beaten by him. Yeah. You know, without trying to be like, oh, look at me, I'm the best. Like, I've seen people behind us and they're coming like 4th, 5th, that sort of era, and whatever they're doing, they're not doing properly. There's always the sort of like backlash of people who've done it before and then they've become sober, which means they've had that additional boost. But that's sort of down to whatever federation you're lifting under, as to how they're going to police it, how they're going to work it, what they class as like a clean period, if they're going to do something like that, or if it's just sort of, you've done it, that's it, you're stuck there. You've never done it, you're stuck there. It's never really come up to me as, I've only ever found in like open competitions and things like that, and they're rarely ever judged against weight properly. That you're going to find that you're going, okay, this gear bloke's up against us. But for me, it's almost like a yardstick. It's like, here's something I've not done, here's an advantage I've not taken. So well, I'm going to beat him. You know, my eyes sort of sink in and I get a little bit more like, a little bit of venom appears in the lift. It's like, I've got to do this because, you know, I've got to prove it for the sober boys. But it is a little bit sad these days that with like the divisions and things like that, really, really hard to be proud to be sober sort of outwardly. Like, I'm a prolific Instagram user and love posting my lifts and stuff. Never post sobriety on any of them. I don't want the aggro and the backlash that can come with it, where people just put it in as that last little thing. It's the same as hearing, and you've probably heard it a few times over your run in lifting. I hear it a lot. It's someone a lot bigger than me go, oh, you're really strong for your size.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't, you know, you're putting an attitude in there that doesn't need to be put in. Comparatively or not, I'm just really strong. It's the same sort of thing with being sober. People treat it in the same sort of light, where it's like, oh, he's really strong and he's sober. You know, you shouldn't be there. It shouldn't really be an issue. It should just be declare what you are. Don't become the liver king and pretend like in the most transparent way possible that you're sober and go, yeah, no, you know, I've got no agenda and nothing to sell or push. I'm not trying to get anyone to buy Herbalife. So for me, it's just be honest and just get on with it.
I think overall, it's just a testament to your consistency and your commitment to lifting.
I think it helps with your consistency. I was discussing it with my coach probably about a year ago. There's no peaks and troughs to how I train, and there wouldn't be, because it's the natural way. Your body can push what it should push. There's no, I was halfway up a cycle, I was taking the wrong amount of this, there was no, this tablet was getting in the way of doing this. It makes you, gives you the opportunity to be more consistent, because there's only your body at risk. It's not chemical levels within your body. It's not, oh, I couldn't afford to get this to push me this much further. And it sort of relies to the other reason I've always sort of stayed off it, especially when it's big lifting, it's numbers you're chasing, is, yeah, it's not addictive. I understand that. But the reality is, if I went for my next goal is 280, right? If I went, I'm going to get on however many milligrams of whatever, and I'm going to pull this 280. When I want to get past that 280, I've just created my own X factor. I know what I know, right, I can't beat this, I'm plateauing, I can't get past this 280 I've got. I then know I need to go back and do what I did to get to 280. It's a self-serving cycle. You're always going to be, to push that next bit, you know what that thing was that you took additionally that pushed you over the limiter. So you'll never be off it as long as you want to compete. And I'm not willing to put myself in that sort of, not a trap, but that cycle of, okay, let's go. Right, I need to be, it's going to cost me this much to get this next. It shouldn't be that way for me. I want to be able to just do it. Go out and put the work in and go, right, okay, conditions are good. Conditions are less than good. Okay, let's see what we've got.
And on top of that, it's like you're jeopardising the future health. If you were to get on gear just for lifting and hitting some numbers, I mean, you're a family man. How was your health going to be in like 20 years after being on gear? You never know.
No, it's a complete crapshoot. And as I say, like what I said with the youngsters, it's like you don't know what you're taking or how, or, you're going to have to experiment with it to get it to where you want it to be. For what's going to be the most beneficial to you isn't the most beneficial to the next bloke along. They've got a different genetic makeup, they've got a different diet, they've got different ability to recover. It's got to be personalised to you. So you're always going to have to experiment with what works for you. And that's the same with anything in sport, is even your lifting. As I said to you off camera, was if I was to change something in your lift or change something in my lift, I think it's about a month to 2 months before it takes effect on your lifting. It's that amount of time, and it can be simple, something as simple as slightly different hand position, moving your feet slightly further apart, or sorting your back angle out, anything like that. If it's something really obvious, if it's bracing, if it's something you're not doing that you should be, all right, it'd be an instant change. If it's something bigger, it's like 4 to 8 weeks before it's taken effect. If you're doing that with something dangerous and something that's an aggressive chemical, it can end really badly.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming down and talking to me today. While we're still rolling, is there anything else you'd like to bring up at all, or that anything maybe I've missed, or?
Not really. I mean, I've gone through most things. I'd like to say thank you to those that have helped us out over the years. Massive shout out to Big John Bowles Physiques Gym, taking me in after I left my first gym. Couldn't ask for a nicer bloke to look after us. He's been really kind with equipment, time, me leaving a mess in his gym. He's been really understanding over the years. Big shout out to Craig is the Bearded Anarchist, or Mayhem Methods, for coaching. Really good with us. Can't argue with what he's done. He's managed to get me off the plateau of deadlift, and we've added 12.5 kilos to it in the last year and a half, which is it's a massive push. It doesn't sound a lot, but over the time it just builds and builds.
Yeah.
And just, whatever you're doing with sport or you're doing lifting, just keep consistent, keep pushing, and just work at it.